So, a little bit earlier, I made a tweet about the American Revolution, basically saying that it was the first anti-colonial revolution, and that it inspired people from Simon Bolivar to Mao Zedong. And so, that caused a lot of trouble, a lot of tension. So I decided, I would just invite people here who disagreed with me to debate about it. Okay, Ruka, I assume you disagree,
Yes.
though, right? You want to debate?
Yeah, I disagree. So,
Okay, go ahead.
there's a couple things I can say. First of all, the revolution was very regressive in many aspects. First of all, number one, regarding slavery, many African slaves literally joined the British Army because they promised them freedom, whereas the American Revolution just allowed America to continue chattel slavery throughout the South through decades to come. Second of all, the revolution, one of the reasons why the revolution happened was so George Washington could continue manifest destiny into the American East. Into the American West. There's nothing anti-colonial about this. It's just a continuation of another settler colony. I don't see anything really particularly progressive about this. It's just one settler colony, against another colony, colonial power.
Okay, so I got a pretty simple response to that. So the first argument, which is that it was regressive because it preserved slavery. Well, that's actually not true. The Constitution preserved the position that slavery, the slave trade, there would be no slaves traded or bought, or sold after a certain year. I think it was maybe can't remember exactly what year it was. Maybe it's 1805, something along those lines. But the Constitution actually preserved that position. And there's no real evidence that Britain was really going to eliminate slavery in the Americas. And continue that. The reason why I'm so doubtful of this idea that Britain was going to eliminate slavery in the Americas is because Britain heavily benefited economically from slavery in the South, which is why British financiers, even up until the Civil War, supported and funded the South. Britain itself took a neutral position, but covertly, British financiers were funding the South. And this is why Marx even wrote polemics against the British who were attacking Lincoln and funding the South. So I find it highly suspect, this idea that Britain was really going to eliminate slavery in the Americas. As far as manifest destiny goes, all the colonial powers of Europe had plans to colonize the rest of the Americas. Britain was not going to stop going westward just because of some kind of moral reason or because they were morally better than the Americans. It was because they could not afford to do so. They were reaching a kind of capacity. They could barely hang on to the colonies they had. And so they didn't want to form new colonies. If it wasn't for American expansion to the West, there wouldn't have been expansion to the West by one of the European colonial powers. That's just absolutely, completely, and utterly false. Now, I'll give some context as to why I called it a anti-colonial war. It's because it quite literally liberated the American colonies from the British, and in place of these colonies, states were formed and a sovereign republic came into existence. And the Americans, this newly formed nation of Americans, or the people of Americans that were living in these colonies, they now had liberation from the British monarchy. I mean, Lenin described this as one of the great liberating wars of humanity, of history, one of the great revolutionary wars of history. And not only did this liberate the Americans from British colonial rule, but also this ended up being the basis for anti-colonial revolutions throughout the world. I mean, Simon Bolivar, who was a revolutionary who liberated much of modern day South America, was inspired heavily by George Washington's revolution. So it's very clear, this connection to anti-colonial revolution that 1776 has. Now, you can say that America still after the revolution was a settler colonial power. Yes, that's true. I don't deny that. But the revolution still had anti-colonial significance, which was drawn out by Simon Bolivar, which was the point of my tweet. And also, it has a general revolutionary significance, I think, that would then provide inspiration to Lenin and especially to Mao Zedong. who studied Washington's military tactics and everything, very, very greatly and in great detail.
Well, there's a couple of things. So, first of all, on the Constitution, like abolishing slavery, America actually did continue the slave trade, just like by trading through Mexico and Cuba. W.E. Du Bois has an entire book describing how this happened. The other thing I was going to say, so about British expansion, it is possible. In fact, I would say it's still obviously likely that Britain would have expanded, further west, obviously. But Britain had more like treaties already aligned with the Indian people, and also they probably didn't want to mess with France in the same way. So I do think Western expansion would have happened, but I do think it probably would have been more limited under the British Empire. Obviously, this could, there's a million different things that could have happened. The other thing regarding slavery. The British Empire, through all its faults, it did abolish slavery a couple of decades before America did. And the British Empire literally did give promises of freedom to African slaves who joined the British Army in the Revolution. So certainly for those African slaves that joined, the British Army, it would have been better for them if Britain won, because they would actually have, won their freedom essentially. And the thing about anti-colonial struggle, like you say, it's like independence or like liberation for the American people. But what American people? Like 1/5 out of all people in the Americas were slaves. The other people were indigenous. Women didn't even have rights. Like, who was this freedom for? It was freedom for a very small portion of the population. It was freedom for the white bourgeois elites. That's who it was freedom for. So who was it really freedom for? It wasn't freedom for the indigenous people. It wasn't freedom for the slaves. So I don't really see this as an independent at all. It's just changing the oppressor from a British oppressor to an American oppressor.
Okay, so here's my response to that. I think so as far as slavery not really being completely ended, the slave trade not being completely ended after that year, yeah, that's true. But I supplemented that point by saying that I don't think Britain actually had plans to end slavery in America or the slave trade in America to begin with, because as I said, and this is well documented, British financiers financed the South even during the Civil War. So even after Britain itself had put an end to slavery within its empire, it was still financing slavery in America because slavery in the southern states was so like foundational and important to the British economy at the time. I mean, these financiers had a great stake in preserving slavery. I mean, Marx himself writes about this. He writes about the British support for the South, for the slave-owning South. So in the context of America, again, historically speaking, Britain was not on the side of liberating the black people. They may have used that opportunistically during the Revolutionary War. But just from what history shows itself, in the Civil War, you have British financiers funding the slave-owning South and propping up the slave-owning South.
Well, then why did Britain end slavery in the Caribbean?
I mean, it's a matter of their financial interests. They may have ended slavery in the Caribbean. That doesn't mean that they would have ended slavery in the Americas. There was a strong stake in preserving slavery in the Americas. I mean, do you deny like the argument I'm making, the fact that I'm like pointing out that they did fund slavery in the South?
No,
they did fund the Confederate States.
It's true. I just think I don't know if the British Empire had the same I don't think the British Empire would have the same level of interest as American colonists did. I don't know if the level of interest is the same.
No, they had even more interest, because even when America itself was fighting a war against the South and was putting an end to slavery, they themselves are trying to preserve it. Because slavery in America specifically, it was still a big part of the British economy. The British states, formally speaking, remained neutral, but these same people who had power in the British state, the British financial class, was investing heavily in the Confederate States.
Well, that's the financial class, not the government. There's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, but the financial, but the financial class, I mean, if you're, a Marxist, you obviously know this. They have a strong backing in the government, especially in the, as you get to the middle and the late 1800s, where they start to collude more and more with the state power. I mean, the British government was not some neutral government. It is the bourgeois states with the remnants of the British royalty.
Well, yes, okay. Go to the next point.
So, I mean, that's... Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad you accept that. Now, the second point you made was about expansion. I think you already agreed that Britain was likely going to expand west. But my point wasn't even specifically about Britain, because I do think that maybe they would have expanded more slowly, or maybe there would have been more limits, because I think there was kind of a capacity to how far they could go, right? If they're having this much trouble maintaining the 13 colonies, how are they going to deal with 26 colonies, right? They did reach some limits, right? So I can see that. But my point, I think, is that if it wasn't Britain, if it wasn't America, it would have been some other French, not French, but specifically, but some other European colonial power like France, like Spain, etc., that would have expanded westward. I mean, all the European colonial powers had plans to expand westward. So I think this is kind of a non-point. We can all agree that American expansion westward, I mean, it was genocidal. It caused mass death, and it was obviously very bad. But this was not unique to America, and it was not regressive. So actually, this was not regressive, as you said. It was more so the status quo of European colonialism in general.
So the fact that you bring up Spain, I think, is actually a point that I was going to make. It is true that all empires wanted to expand, commit genocide, but the way that American and English colonizers did was actually quite a bit more extreme than some of the other colonizers did. There's a reason why Spanish colonies like Mexico and Peru, etc., they have massive indigenous populations still around. The entire indigenous populations in South America didn't get genocided, in the way that they did in the Americas. Not to say it was better, that much better, but I do not think Spain would have committed genocide on the same level as America. And we can see this with countries like Mexico, where the indigenous population is still alive to a still pretty noticeable extent. They didn't get genocided the way indigenous people in America did.
Yeah, well, I'm not necessarily saying it would have been as brutal as France or Spain expanded there, but I think it's again it's kind of a non-point. I mean, even American settler colonialism had different characteristics than British settler colonialism. So I don't think that's really a strong point. Another point I want to make as well is that I think you have to take into account the distinctions between South America and North America when you try to factor in the different ways in which colonization happened.
Well, Mexico's North America.
Well, yeah, I know, yeah. But I mean, let's say Hispanic America. You know what I mean? I think you have to take into account some of the differences because, in some cases, I mean, you have Spain making contact with more advanced, more powerful civilizations that are able to put up more of a fight than the Native Americans. You have basically a different kind of civilizational interaction, not just on the side of the Spanish, but also on the side of the indigenous people. That was unique to, that form of colonialism. It was different to America. Now, you can make arguments. Maybe colonial expansion would have been a bit less worse, but I don't think it's very material to the point. My point is not this. My point is not that the American Revolution ended colonial expansion in America. My argument is that American Revolution ended the expansion of the British Empire, and for the first time, it set up a republican government, right, in which these states aren't colonies anymore, but as sovereign states with a fair share of democratic liberties and democratic rights. Now, you may make the argument that these rights and liberties, I think you made this earlier, do not extend to all people, right? Obviously, there was still slave owning, and then in women. But the thing about women, I think that's not really a smart point to make, because at this point in time, I mean, women did not have full rights, I think, anywhere in the world. So I don't think
black people could vote in Ireland and shit, in Ireland and the UK.
But even then, you're pointing out an outlier. I don't think it's a very material point. It's in Britain, I mean, did women have full civil liberties and suffrage?
Well, I'm talking about African people. I'm talking about African people.
Yeah, well, that's just completely civilizationally different. Now we're talking about completely different context. It's not. I don't think that's even relevant at all to the development of European civilizations at that point. If you bring in the way African women lived, I mean, that's just not a relevant point. Now, but here's what I will say though, and I think this is something you have to admit to, which was that the abolition of slavery in America, it did not come into contradiction with the American Revolution or the American Constitution. It actually was based in the Constitution and was made a part of the Constitution by becoming an amendment in the Constitution, and became a part of the Constitution as a living and evolving document, as opposed to a dead, law The Constitution is a living document, and so it was actually utilized to abolish slavery. Same with women's suffrage, right? There was an amendment placed in the Constitution for this. So this is completely not only compatible with the American Revolution, but I would say rooted in the American Revolution, because it's precisely the American Revolution, which was the first Republican, democratic revolution, that laid the basis for this, because it was based upon these Republican values and these Republican ideas, the idea that all men are created equal, et cetera, and so on, that there was a kind of legal and basis for these movements in the first place. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, hold on. So about the point about slavery, if we do like an actual historical analysis, we can understand that slavery didn't really end, like sharecropping, neo-slavery, prison systems, etc.
It's not the same thing, though. But it's not the same thing as formerly existing slavery. There is a distinction. You do have to admit that.
Yeah, but like look at
it's not the same thing.
Sharecropping. Like sharecropping is not that much better.
Yeah, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing. The end of slavery in America was a great world historic development. I mean, Marx himself writes about this, calling Lincoln the son of the working class, talking about how the end of slavery was also a precondition for a proletarian revolution later on. It was a precondition for the rise of the American working class. So yes, after slavery, obviously forms very similar of oppression, very similar to slavery, did still persist for a long time. It's not the same thing as actual like legal formal slavery, where people are on a legal basis considered less than other people and are treated like chattel and like or as inhuman. After this point, at least after this point, everyone in America is formally speaking considered to have the same humanity. That's the significance of it. We all have the same formal humanity. That was what the Civil War and the amendment, Emancipation Proclamation, etc., set the basis for the inclusion of all people into into this modern humanity.
Well, hold on. So one thing, legitimate literal chattel slavery, though, did continue under like American protectorates, like under colonial Cuba. When America occupied Cuba, they allowed slavery to full scale slavery to continue in Cuba. So they still kind of had this slavery. They just put it into other colonies.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. The entire way in which American territories have been treated, I think everyone would agree, is grotesque and was very wrong. But that doesn't really get into the very heart of the point that I'm getting at. And I think I'm making a very uncontestable point, which was that, again, the end of slavery in America was not opposed to the American Revolution or its revolutionary history or the American Constitution, but was, again, based in the exact same Republican values that the American Revolution was based in. Now, you may say that slavery continued in the territories, yes, and that's obviously wrong. But even the very paradigm from which you call this wrong was created itself by the American Revolution and by other Republican revolutions throughout history, which laid the basis for you to even have this viewpoint on slavery. It was a very precondition for there to be this kind of universal recognition of the barbarism of slavery was stuff the Civil War and the expansion basically of the Republican progressive contributions of the American Revolution.
Well, you say it's not in contradiction, but you do realize that in the Declaration of Independence, they described indigenous people as barbarians and savages, etc. In the Declaration of Independence, they literally said this. So I do think, we can say that, a lot of these values actually are in opposition to the foundation of America.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. We were talking about slavery, slavery of the black people. And you bring up this point about indigenous people. Obviously, that's wrong, but that's not even relevant to the point we were talking about. Secondly, the Declaration of Independence, unlike the Constitution, doesn't hold doesn't really hold legal weight in the way the Constitution does. And again, even if there are things in the Constitution that may be in contradiction with progressive developments later on in American history, my point still stands, which is that the values that the Independence Revolution was based upon, as its final conclusion, includes the inclusion of all people into this new modern humanity and the existence of a formal democracy and republicanism. I mean, I don't think this is really debatable or contestable. I mean, even so, for example, I'll give you another example, one involving the French Revolution, right? So the French Revolution was based upon these ideas of fraternity of nations, egalitarianism, formal equality beneath the law, etc., and all these kinds of things. But at the same time, they had slaves in Haiti, right? But all this proved was that there is a contradiction between these outdated colonialist and chattel slavery practices, right, and the very foundation of the new Republican movement in France. In America, you have a similar contradiction. In America, on the one hand, you have these Republican values. Then on the other hand, you have their contradiction with these outdated and outmoded practices of slavery, colonialism, and so on. And so there's a contradiction here. I'm not saying that the bad stuff didn't happen, but I'm saying that there is a contradiction here. There is this other side of things. And the American Revolution, perhaps better than anything else, represents precisely the progressive side of America and the revolutionary side of America and the liberating side of America and America's contribution to humanity. And this is, I think, just the standard Marxist-Leninist position. I mean, Lenin talks about this. He calls the American Revolution one of the great liberating revolutions of all of history, and he puts more praise on it than even I do. I mean, Mao Zedong talks about this. Says that Washington and Lincoln were progressive men of their time. I mean, this conclusion, I think, has just been the standard Marxist-Leninist conclusion. Not even just Marxist-Leninist, but the standard Marxist conclusion up until very recently. And the idea that it is the strange or so-called padsock position, to me, is just very bizarre, because up until the emergence of the currently existing fake ML left, this has just been the standard position across Marxists almost universally, that there was a progressive side to the American Revolution, that it was on the whole progressive in its historical
I don't
context.
think the Black Panthers would agree with you.
You don't think who?
I don't think the Black Panthers would agree with you, and they were a Marxist-Leninist party.
Okay, go ahead. Give your reference to them.
Hold on, let me find.
I mean, the Black Panthers talked about the Constitution all the time, so
I can probably find something. I'll get it later. I don't have my notes with me. But the thing I was going to say is, I do think this isn't the Constitution. It has literally never fully actually ratified itself.
Doesn't have to.
But what do those values mean if they never get practiced ever?
See, this is why you don't understand materialism. No ideal ever reaches completion, but that's not the point. The point is, what is its material, practical meaning in world history? Its material, practical meaning in world history was that it was the start of a progressive development in world history where monarchies and aristocracies were overthrown and replaced by republics. You could say bourgeois republics, right? And this is basically kind of like the start of political modernity in a way. And eventually, over time, reach this kind of status quo where we all have a kind of commonly guaranteed and formally recognized humanity before the law, enshrined into our constitutions, and so on. The American Revolution was undeniably the start of this. I believe it was the first democratic revolution, actually. And it was a bourgeois revolution, yes, but if you actually read Marx and Engels and Lenin and so on, I mean, what you will find out is that during this time period, the bourgeoisie were actually a revolutionary class, and in many cases came to represent the general interest of their people. This was one such case. It started a process, a revolutionary process that stretched across South America, that went to the Soviet Union, that went to France, that went to China. This was the very start of all of that. It was the American Revolution.
Well, I would say the Haitian Revolution was the first democratic revolution, in my opinion, because they actually abolished slavery. But when it comes to America, the reason I'm bringing up the fact that it never actually ratified itself is, to me, it seems like
even the Haitian Revolution, though, even the Haitian Revolution, in many ways, it was based upon the ideals of the French Revolution. And that's part of why it had such strong moral forces, because France basically became in contradiction with itself.
I mean, maybe.
Zizek talks about how when the French soldiers approached the Haitian revolutionaries, they were singing the same songs and stuff like that. It was France came into contradiction with itself in Haiti because French slavery in Haiti did not actually represent the true values and meaning of the French Revolution. I mean, this is just the movement of history. This is an irony of the development of what Hegel would call the world spirit, or you can call it the class struggle. It is a greater movement in history that the American Revolution and French Revolution represented that went on to gain further significance when it came to slavery revolts and so on. So I think in a way you're kind of proving my point with this reference to the Haitian Revolution.
What I'm kind of trying to say is that, like, compared to like other revolutions, even at the time, I don't think America was like that progressive.
I mean, America it was the first revolution of this type. You can say that other revolutions at other points in time went further, but it was the first revolution of this type. It was the first, I guess you could say, bourgeois Republican revolution.
I guess that's
it
true.
It was, but I don't know what more there is to say about that.
So what the point I'm saying though is that, like, what is the point in like bringing up these like so-called?
I'm so glad you asked me about that. Let me okay, go ahead.
So like, why do we? So let me bring up something that Mao said, right? When he had his like revolution, he understood the importance of Chinese culture, but he also understood, like, the four olds, like getting rid of old ideas, old traditions, and old things that hold them back. Why are we like, these figures are ultimately bourgeois?
I'm so glad you're asking this. I'm really glad you're. So I get what you're saying though.
Let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead. I just have a
so really like even Lenin says that, like, after the Russian Revolution, he's like, we're not going to be using these bourgeois symbols. We're going to have our own symbols. So why the fuck are we, like, praising these old figures when we need like a newer, more, I guess, revolutionary?
Yeah, I gotcha. I completely get what you're saying, and I have a really beautiful response to that. So, since you brought up China, I'm going to kind of address that on its own way, because there's actually quite a lot of beauty to this development from Mao to Xi Jinping. So in Chinese history, Mao was a legalist kind of figure. He was often compared to, for example, the first emperor of China, in that they both were kind of they both, reunified China, and they were these kind of legalist figures. Now, the thing about legalism is that it's very pragmatic. You could even say it's negative in the sense of negating outdated cultural norms and this kind of thing. So that was kind of Mao's thing about negating the four olds, is that it was a legalist kind of thing of being brutally pragmatic and putting into critique all of a Chinese culture. But there's a dialectic at play here, because it was Mao's legalist critique of Chinese traditional culture during the Cultural Revolution, which paved the way for the return of traditional Chinese culture in an even more stronger and powerful form during the Xi Jinping era. And this is a dialectic that's common to legalist emperor historically. He will criticize Chinese tradition and Confucianism, which is basically kind of like an index in many ways of the rights, moral norms, and so on, social customs of China. It'll criticize that. But then this criticism of Confucianism allows Confucianism to return even stronger, because through this negation of Confucianism, it's tampered. It's made to become more advanced. It's made to criticize itself and basically evolve through it. So Mao's critique of Chinese culture was not actually just to remove or negate Chinese culture, but actually, if anything, in a dialectical way, allowed for a return of traditional Chinese culture in a much more powerful, beautiful form in the modern Xi Jinping era, which is why now there's a Confucian movement in China, and Confucianism, both in a political sense and in a more ritualistic sense, I guess you could say, is returning in China. Now, as far as Lenin goes, you actually have a very similar thing. By the time you get to Stalin, no longer is it that the Bolsheviks have to have this critical attitude towards Russian culture, but Russian culture actually starts to become rehabilitated under Stalin. He brings back the Orthodox Church. He also talks about how there is no such thing as proletarian culture, but that culture must always have a national form. And he talks about the blossoming of national cultures. And Lenin himself, he says that to be a communist is to be acquainted with all the wealth and treasures of mankind. And so in this way, he's in a very powerful way actually promoting an acquaintance with the tradition and with history, because for him, this is the treasures of mankind that all communists must be acquainted with to be a proper communist. He would call just a blanket negation of traditional cultures as Philistinism. Now, to get back to America and to get back kind of to the main point, the point is this. In order to be a true revolutionary, you must come from a standpoint of objectivity. All revolutions are not only pointed towards the future, but also rooted in the past. So, for example, the French Revolution drew back to the ancient Romans and the Greeks. Stalin drew back to Ivan the Terrible. As I mentioned before, the revival of Confucianism in China. All revolutions are rooted in an objective history. So what we are trying to do is discover the objective history of America, the progressive side of this, the good side of this, the revolutionary side of this, and we must root ourselves in this revolutionary significance and give it a new meaning. You don't simply create revolutions out of thin air. They have to be rooted in something concrete, something real, something material. And this is in 1776 is a very important moment in the development of America. You have to confront 1776. You can't simply reject it. You have to make a real confrontation with it, both in its negatives and in its positives, and root yourself in its revolutionary character. This is something. Let me finish. This is something that is unavoidable, and I would go even further. Not only do Americans have to go back to 1776, but you even have to go back to America's pre-colonial realities. Even a contact with old indigenous cultures and tribal cultures that existed, I think, must be done. There must be a kind of a revival of what it means to be American, and that can only inevitably be rooted in the past through the future. So it's about a dialectic of progress and conservation, of a dialectic of future and past. We're not one-sided on this. We're not one-sided progressives. We're not one-sided conservatives. There's a dialectic that is at play here. So I would say that's kind of my main response. And also, just another thing I want to point out is that, I mean, if Mao Zedong can draw inspiration from Washington and study Washington intensely, and this was, formed part of the basis of Mao Zedong's revolutionary practices, then of course Americans should be able to do the same thing. I think that's almost common sense at that point. So you go ahead and respond to that.
Yeah. So the difference between Mao, though, is he could take inspiration from these supposedly bourgeois revolutions, but he wasn't going to uphold their symbolism. He wasn't going to fucking have the Lincoln statue. He wasn't. No,
he did. He did. He did. He literally said that Lincoln should be ratified into the Communist Party of China. He said that. Did you not know that? He goes even further than I do. Even I don't.
He's still.
So, what
I'm saying is he understands.
And also, as far as the symbolism goes, you have to understand another thing too, is that the symbolism thing is that in the context of the Russian Revolution, you have a tsardom, right? And this tsardom doesn't have the same revolutionary character of the American flag. It didn't. But even the flag of the Russian Empire, even that has returned in the Russian Federation. So symbols, I think you can't just get too attached to them. They can take different significances and different meanings, and they can be used in different ways. They can be used in different ways. And and if you look at modern China, there's a lot of ancient symbolism, a lot of, there's so much traditional Chinese culture that's part of the political culture now. This obsession with the rejection of symbols, I don't see the point of it.
Okay, well, there's one last point I guess I can bring up about this, trying to revive history and so on. I feel especially when we're talking about the history of empires, I feel this has a very, very possible like reactionary element to it. Like, for example, like Mussolini, he like glorified the Roman Empire. He's like, oh, we need to go back to Rome. We need to do this again. Like, I feel like if we glorify empires, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot and actually saying that no, these empires are fucking flawed and we don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah, so I would say it's the exact opposite. So we're not trying to return to the past in any sort of one-sided way. My position is this: through the future, the past returns inevitably. This was the case in Russia. It was the case in China. In fact, communism revived civilizations. In China, communism allowed for the complete revival of traditional Confucian civilization. That's just objectively the facts. And it wasn't that this was necessarily a plan, but this is, I think, something in an objective historical development. Secondly, we're not drawing back to America in its capacity as an empire. We're drawing back to the legacy of America as a republic, which is the same thing that many non-Americans did during their revolutions. So we're drawing back to the progressive side of American history. In fact, our position is this: it is precisely the history of the American Republic that can be wielded against the history of the American Empire, because America itself is characterized by an internal contradiction. And if you actually read Mao, in his on contradiction, what does he say? He says political development is based upon the development of internal contradictions. We simply view America as not being just an empire, but as having an internal contradiction. And we are mobilizing, unleashing the progressive side of this contradiction. We are setting in motion the dialectic. That's what we're doing.
Well, I don't really have anything else to say, but I'll think about this.
Okay, one thing I'll leave you with, just to kind of give you a more concrete example of how this works in motion. Right now, I think America has truly come into contradiction with its own empire, because we live in an era in which the American empire set itself up as a globalist world empire. And as a globalist world empire, its interest and its realities are now in contradiction with America as a determinate particular country and newly forming civilization. I mean, this is why America borrows endless amounts of money, but nearly none of that money goes to the people or to building up the American country, and almost all of it goes to war. America's become like a debt recycling machine where it just borrows endless money and throws it all into wars that kill Americans and kill humans in general, and leave us all with less.
Well, there's one last thing I was going to bring up. So about like civilization, I don't know if Lenin would agree with your terminology, because I would say that America is a state with many nations within it. I don't think there's a unified American nation at all. Like even Lenin.
I didn't say, a nation's not a civilization, though. That's in fact that's the point. Civilizations are always multinational.
So when you use the term like American people, like are you referring to all America, like all nations within America? Like I don't know, like how you're using this term.
I'm referring to. I would say I'm referring to all the nations that have a historical relation to America. So this would be, for example, white Americans, Black Americans, Hispanic American. But I'm referring to people who have roots in a history in America, and also have something common to them. I think Americans do all have something that is common to them that unifies them. One of these things, and this is why I think 1776 can't be ignored, is the Constitution. Another thing I would say is that America is a Christian civilization, particularly Protestant, but there's also a Catholic side of things because of the Hispanics that live in America. Stuff like this, and I think America again is a newly formed civilization, and so it's less explicit, right? What is the unified character of the American people? But there is an American people. It may not be explicit yet. It may be unawakened, but there is an American civilization that is in formation. Okay. And I mean, even Stalin, I don't remember the full quote offhand, but just to kind of paraphrase it, even Stalin says that the American people have formed into a nation. Now, I don't take this like a completely literally, because obviously, there's multiple nations in America, but I think all he meant by this was basically that historically, Americans have also become indigenized to this land and have become a real people that's separate from the English and from European ancestors. They have become their own people.
But don't people literally use this to say that, like, oh, Taiwan is a nation, so therefore it should be separate?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. The fact that Taiwan is a nation doesn't mean that it's separate from Chinese civilization. The whole point of speaking of civilizations, well, not the whole point, but a big part of the point of speaking of civilizations is that civilizations historically have always been multinational and have always coalesced many different national realities. I mean, even in the mainland of China, you have many, many different nations inside of China. But you have a Chinese super identity, the civilizational identity, which is above and beyond all of this, not through the negation of these national realities, but actually through the particularity and significance of these national realities does the civilizational reality emerge.
Well, this is why Mao specifically criticized Han chauvinism, like for this exact reason, for the different nations.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to tell you, though, is that Han nationalism is the rejection of civilization. Nationalism is inferior to civilization. Like, do you see what I'm trying to say here? Like, civilization does not refer to like a specific nation. It's a unity of nations, of anything. It's a unity of nations that share a kind of common historical reality, just to kind of simplify things.
Okay, well, I don't really have anything else to say. I gotta go, but this was interesting.
All right. Well, hope you have a good night. It was a pretty good discussion. I'll see who else wants to debate. Hello. Did you want to debate about this? Hello, Julie. Did you want to debate?
Oh, yeah. No, I wanted to tell a story.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to tell a story about what I think that people feel about their American identity. Would that be appropriate in this space?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I had this experience last summer with my boyfriend. Like, we're pretty political, and I have some like wacky religious ideas. He has some wacky political ideas, and we just can't do the Pledge of Allegiance. And so last summer we went to a concert. I think it was like a cover band for Led Zeppelin, and it was in the public park. And they opened it with the Pledge of Allegiance. And like my boyfriend, because, he has like problems, he took the knee. And I had no problem with him doing that. But like everyone else said the Pledge of Allegiance so loud and so proud. And I thought to myself, like, what are they actually pledging? Like, what does this actually mean to them? And the answer that I came up with is that it's not really the American Revolution or the American project that they're pledging themselves to. What they're doing is just trying to make a connection to their community, just trying to make meaning of their life in the space that they're in. And I think the revolution can just get fucked, and the American project is a fucking failure. But I love my countrymen. I love the people that go to the Led Zeppelin cover band concert with me. And I'll pass to someone else.
Here's what I would say in response to that, just kind of briefly. While I do agree that it is to have a connection to the American community, because on an objective, kind of unconscious way, this is the country you were born in, this is the country you live in, and these are the people you live with. These are the people that work in this country, that create this country, and so on, right? So there's a deep kind of unconscious connection to one's community. But the very basis for this, to begin with, is, nothing other than the American Revolution. It's the objective basis for this common American reality or identity that exists in the first place. And I think you have to have a certain amount of respect or reverence for these kinds of foundational things like the Constitution, which unifies Americans as Americans in the first place, and to some extent protects the rights of Americans, and that the elites are trying to do away with, that the elites are trying to circumvent, and that the elites are creating all these loopholes to, go around and to attack, these kinds of foundational rights that have always unified Americans as Americans. So for me, it's just a recognition of the kind of objective historical reality of America that makes America American in the first place. That's really all it is. So I'm going to see if anyone else wants to speak. Okay, Maynard, did you want to debate?
No, hell no. I like what you said. I think we need to just keep fucking democracy working. God damn it. Can't we? Why can't we?
Completely agree. We gotta see the kind of vision I have is that we have these people in Congress and the president himself as well who are trying to corrode American democracy, who are trying to corrode our constitutional rights. And we have to defend our Constitution. We have to defend our rights as Americans. And that's just kind of my baseline position. That's a preliminary position you got to have just to protect these kind of basic rights that we're supposed to be guaranteed as an American. I'm going to invite on some other people, see if there's anyone disagrees, just so I can have debates with anyone who thought.
Hey,
yeah, go ahead.
I had a quick question.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that guy brought the Black Panthers earlier, but weren't the Black Panthers like where they're about the Constitution and constitutional rights, correct?
Yeah, that's what I thought as well, but he didn't really. That's why I asked him what his quote was or what his reference was, but he never really gave the reference he was quoting.
Yeah,
to.
because if you read Huey Newton's autobiography, Revolutionary.
Yeah, Black Panthers were on the up and up, dude.
Yeah, he talks a lot about how he became a constitutional expert in that autobiography he wrote. So I just thought that was kind of strange he'd bring that up, Yeah,
I think a lot of leftists have a very incorrect view of the Black Panthers. I mean, the Black Panthers even united with the groups like the Young Patriots and kind of a common united front against a common enemy. And I think that's what we have to do now. We have to unite across national differences against these elites who are trying to destroy our democracy. I'm gonna invite some other people on just to see if anyone wants to debate me. I think Growing want to come on. Growing, do you have anything you want to say?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask about what about people? I don't want to be exclusionary, but I mean it has to be brought up because you were mentioning that a communist has to know their history of the place that they're in to be able to, a good communist has to do that. What about communists who are in a country that they have no history in? And specifically to the United States more than anything, because there's a lot of that.
Yeah, here's what I would say. So the first thing I would say is that one should never give up their kind of historical identity. Like if you come from China, you should never give up your, your Chinese history. If you come from Russia, you shouldn't give up your Russian history. If you come from India, you shouldn't give up your Indian history, etc. I think you should, hold on to your own historical identity as well. And so that's just a baseline, I think, because I feel like a lot of immigrants become leftist and then they get stuck into this kind of liberal cosmopolitanism where they feel like they have to reject their own kind of cultural values and cultural norms for this kind of hyper-modernistic liberal cosmopolitanism. So that's the first thing I would say. Second thing I would say is this. I'm not an immigrant myself, so I can't really speak for it, but just knowing some immigrants, I would say sometimes say stuff like they feel like they have two souls. One is German, one is Russian, or one is American, one is Chinese, etc. So there is kind of an interesting thing going on there, and I think this is a real answer that's going to happen on a more, I guess, personal level. It's probably going to have to come from an immigrant themselves. Now, the last thing I would say, and this is probably the most important thing, as far as their position or relation to a communist movement or a revolutionary movement in America, all I would say is this: is that it's the same. You're still going to have to draw upon American history, American kind of objective American realities, because this is still the American revolution. This is still the American people, right? If you're going to gain leadership of a people, you have to appeal to them as that people. And even if you're not, even if you're, maybe a bit more different, or even if you have a different culture and so on, I think at the end of the day, people are going to respect authenticity the most, especially Americans. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to whether or not they actually believe you are fighting for them, right? As a people, if you could be a Chinese guy, an Indian guy, whatever, but if try to give representation to the strivings of the American people, I do think that the American people will trust you, will love you. I mean, even Trump himself, he looks like very Russian almost, and is very associated with Russia. But look, the American people trust him, right? It's not so much about your individual identity. It's about whether or not you can authentically love the people of the country you are in and give an authentic representation for their strivings and their needs, and root this in their historical realities. So does that kind of answer what you're saying?
Yeah, but a little. But I need to point out that I don't think it's so much just an aesthetic thing, because you said like Trump looks Russian, but he was born in the United States, and we still have that law that like, you know, anyone born abroad cannot be, you know, president of the United States. And I don't know. I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, like,
I mean, my basic answer is this: there's always going to be some level of a contradiction between people who have lived in the country for a very long time and people who have newly arrived in the country. I think there's always going to be some level of contradiction there. I mean, every country has like some degree of a contradiction there, or an antagonism there, or difficulty when it comes to immigration issues. I think that's kind of just a norm for countries in general. So that's always going to be there. But when I'm speaking of like their relevance to a political movement, again, I don't think the individual identity is going to be of importance there. I think it's more so it's going to be of importance in their personal life, maybe how how they're able to adjust to America as a person rather than as a political subject. But as a political subject, I really do think that if you are authentically trying to make the lives of normal Americans better, they will come around to trusting you. I mean, one of the ways I think in which different groups of people can gain more authentic trust for each other is precisely through working together for common struggles that can benefit them mutually. So yeah, I think it still comes down to the same thing. You're gonna have to give authentic representation to the strivings of the American people. Now, will there be obstacles that you might face that you might not if your family lived here for a long time? Yeah, probably so. Just because on a very like superficial level, like I said, there is that kind of antagonism that does exist. But I do think in the last instance, if you're able to give authentic expression to the people's will, you can gain their trust, gain their love, and gain leadership. I mean, even Stalin, right? He was the leader of Russia, but he was a Georgian, right? So I don't think it's I don't think in the final instance is going to be the real determinant of your political significance. I mean, a good example that's kind of, I guess, closer to infrared is, I mean, even Haas himself, right, is like son of an immigrant family. He was born in America, but like his family's from Lebanon. So I don't really think that when it comes to this, one's individual identity is going to be the of the greatest political significance. I think it's more important it's going to be more important probably in your personal life.
Okay.
But yeah, I also think though that just being an immigrant in general, I don't think it's really easy in any country. So yeah, there's always going to be more difficulties when it comes to that. But like I said, on a political level, you just got to keep your eye on the ball, which is what is the object, right, of communism? In America, the object of communism is the American people. In China, the object of communism is the Chinese people. In Russia, it's the Russian people. In France, it's the French people, et cetera, and so on. This is the very thing that gives form and determinate reality to communism in the first place, is love for the people. Love for the people is what comes first. Without love for the people, there's nothing. You have to love the people of the country you're in.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, that makes sense.
You can speak, Maynard.
Hello. All I gotta say is, if you come on the internet and you say the words communism or socialism, you best be able to define the motherfuckers.
All right, I can define them. I can define them very easily.
Well, no, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying anybody.
I would put it this way. Communism at its most basic form is love for the people. And from that love for the from that,
I don't need to know. I don't need to know. I know exactly.
I still think it's kind of useful. Like, let me put it this way. The way Marx puts it is this. Communism is the real movement. It is nothing other than the real movement. In America, it's the real movement of the American people to achieve their historical destiny. That's what it means in America. It's the real movement of the American people to achieve their historical destiny. That's what 1776, 2036 means. It means a continuation of the American Revolution, of the birth of America as a country, and of the objective historical realities of America. Communism is one's path towards a people's path towards their destiny, towards their historical destiny.
So is that socialistic communism?
Socialism is not always communism. There's many different kinds of socialism. Like, for example, I guess you could call some of those like. It's not. I mean, no. Just give you an example. If you look just at the American political scene, you look at all the different people calling themselves socialists, right? You have people who almost violently hate me who call themselves socialist. Just because socialism, there's many different kinds. I mean, Marx described, many different types of socialism. He talks about bourgeois socialism, reactionary socialism, etc. And in history, there are many different kinds of socialism. I mean, people call the Nordic countries socialist, right? But then China's also socialist. So there's this great.
Well, I actually prefer the government of Italy because they know what they're doing. They got the mafia running it and socialism fucking dealing with it.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't know what you're talking about anymore, man.
Man, this guy is pretty funny.
This guy's pretty drunk.
I like him. I'm drunk though.
Y'all never lived in Italy.
But yeah. So I'm gonna see if there's anyone else who wants to debate me on that tweet. I'm gonna bring Aaron Locke on. All right, Aaron.
I really like this place. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad, man. I'm glad. So, Aaron, you got anything you want to debate about?
Yeah, fuck Americans.
Okay. Do you have anything to actually substantiate your point, though, or are you just kind of like an anarchist saying, I hate America? Do you actually have like anything substantive to say?
Wait, I love America. I just think your government shit.
Are you English, perhaps?
I'm British, yeah.
Well, it seems like you're still ruled by a monarch.
No limeys.
Huh?
I mean, the dude's got a picture of his abs, bro. I don't know, man. He's got his hand.
Almost his penis. Yeah, what's going on?
All right, shut up, everyone. I want to actually have a dialogue with this guy. Okay, so you said American government is bad. I don't disagree.
I'm not debating anything with you. I'm not all.
So why did you want to come on?
Shit with the guns.
Why did you want to come on?
Because you did sort your shit out with the guns.
What problem do you have with guns?
What problem do I have with guns?
Yeah.
19 fucking kids just died because someone shot up a school.
Okay. But here's the thing. What if the solution to that is not immediately political? What if that's the result of a deep spiritual sickness that exists in America and is not necessarily inherently related to gun laws?
No, dude.
No. Wait a second, though, guys. Just to start off, though, I think the politicization of stuff like this is by itself already very disgusting. But secondly, though, we've had guns in America for a very long time, but these school shootings are a very recent issue, and they say something about America's spiritual condition. You can, and another thing I want to say as well, even if you want, wait a second. Even if you wanted to take the guns away of the American people, they wouldn't give it away. There's no way you're getting the guns out of the South. There's absolutely no way. People who live in South Carolina and Texas and all these places are giving up their guns. You may think that's morally the best thing to do, but it's not possible. It's not even possible.
Yeah, but from now on, stop giving out guns like it's fucking sweet.
I mean, you can't argue that it's spiritual. You can't
It
tell
is.
me that
It's
God
spiritual. It's
that
fucking
God
idiotic.
wants
It's
those
stupid.
children to be
Stupidity.
dead.
You don't get
God-
Wait a second. I never said that God wants people to die. When I say it's spiritual, I said it was a spiritual sickness in the sense that people are psychologically like fucked up today. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying people are psychologically fucked up in America because American culture
Doesn't it have to do a little bit with the thought leaders
Hey,
of
I'll tell
today?
you what the problem with
Fucked
the
up
shootings
that
are.
we'll put up
Materialism and
with it.
capitalism.
There's people fucked up in England, right? But guess what? We don't go shooting up schools. You know why? We don't have access to guns.
Isn't there like a bad knifing problem in England? Don't you guys just like
Yeah.
stab each other?
Yeah, that's the only reason that you don't shoot up people, though.
I mean, say that I think that Aaron is correct because
don't
like people
compare England
in
to America. The crime rate is different level. Yeah.
they used to like bomb schools in England and stuff. Like I think Aaron is right.
No, I don't think. Yeah, but here's the thing: you can't address one country just by using another country's context. In America, you can't take the.
What about Mexico?
The
Mexico has more
gun
gun
rights are
violence.
written into the American Constitution. There's no way that they're being taken away. There's no way they're being taken away. You might want them to be taken away, but that's not going to happen. So you actually have no. I won't shut up. You have to actually have a real political. If you actually want to address this politically, you have to actually have a real political solution. This is not a real political solution because people are not giving up their guns in this country.
Justify it. You're trying to justify your bollocks.
Hey,
I'm not justifying anything. I'm saying that you have to actually confront reality. You're not confronting American reality.
What do you mean? Confront reality is you don't fucking shoot up.
And the reality is you can't take American guns away. You can't do that. That would be political suicide. No president would be elected if he said he's going to take away American guns. And if anyone tried that, it would completely and utterly fail.
True.
It worked in Australia.
Australia's not America.
He's
Guns are an integral part of the American culture and
supporting
the
the guy.
Constitution.
Fuck
Australia's not America.
He'll be the one that
Listen,
failed because
listen.
they take the money.
Listen. You know, if you want to be like the British people or the Australians, you can go to Britain or Australia and live under the thumb of the Queen. But I'd rather live in America where we have constitutional rights and we have a shrine of Republican dignity.
Where kids get shot in school, yeah? Where kids get shot in school.
Yeah, but you haven't actually proposed a solution to that. All you do is point out. All you do is use trauma and tragedy and wield that politically. You haven't actually pointed to a solution to that.
Silly cunt, mate.
You can't actually take American guns away. You can't actually do that. That's the problem.
Hey, the
People are
British
not going
can't
to give
even
it up.
overthrow a goddamn monarch.
What was that?
The British can't even overthrow a fucking monarch.
Yeah. So how do they imagine? This is
What the
stupid.
fuck?
This is just
They can't even
stupid.
overthrow a monarchy. They're fucking pussies, dude.
Who?
The British.
British people.
But you know what? Listen.
Hey,
There's a point you're not addressing, which is that you're not able to take away the guns.
Pussies.
What was that?
I don't think the British are pussies.
Listen, I don't have anything against the British people. I don't have anything against the British people. But if we're gonna play this culture war between Britain and America,
Wait, no, listen.
if we're gonna play that game, I mean, I do have to point out the fact that at least we have a democracy.
Mate, Henry, shut up. I don't have anything against Americans, yeah? I just don't
British
like
can leave anytime.
Yeah, so listen. Stick to your own country when it comes to political solutions. Americans will deal with their political
Yeah,
problems.
so
Stick with your
this
political
is
problems.
America. Why are you here, Brett?
facts. I'm not talking politics. Fuck politics. I'm talking facts.
Come on, Brits, go away.
You're not talking facts. You're actually listen. Here's the thing. You're not being pragmatic. You're completely ignoring reality, which is that Americans are not going to give up their guns. So even if you think that's morally better, Americans are not going to do it. So you have to come up with some other solution because it's just not happening. It's not pragmatic. It's not possible. It's just factually speaking, it's not possible for the American government to take away the guns in America. It would be a complete. In America, you couldn't even get people to wear a COVID mask. How are you going to take their guns if you couldn't even convince them to wear a mask? How are you going to take their guns? It's just not possible.
Yeah. Stop saying
Hey,
them.
your bullshit, Brits, ain't gonna help us. Get the fuck out.
Just focus on your own country.
No, I like Aaron. I think
Jude,
Aaron has a good.
I don't
like this
mind
weirdo
Brits,
who's almost showing his
these
penis
guys
on
are
Twitter.
telling
What the
me
fuck?
what to do.
You're a nice
like
woman,
honesty.
but I'm sorry. Like,
You don't tell
I think
me
you've
what
lost
to
the plot. I think
fucking
you
do.
just lost the plot. I think you've lost the plot.
Hey, I'm winding you all up. I couldn't give a monkeys about any of it, to be honest with
So, Aaron, you got anything else you want to say?
you. I couldn't give a fuck, mate.
So, do you have anything else you want to say? Or is that it?
What do you mean?
Well, you can't vote for our rules, so get the fuck away.
Yeah. So, since you don't have anything else you got to say, I think I'm going to bring someone else on.
Why does Mexico and Brazil have higher gun violence? I mean, I don't understand. Like, their gun violence is way
Okay,
worse,
let's
but
see.
they're more strict on guns.
Let's see who else wants to talk.
Mexico is worse
I
than
want to.
America.
I want to point something out.
Okay, we have someone named
earlier about-
Ibra. Wait, everyone shut up. I brought someone on named Ibra.
Yo, what's up?
Yo, did you want to
All right,
debate?
so the main part is your proposed argument says that our only option is to take the guns, but no, there's the second.
That's not my argument. That was not my argument. That was the other guy's argument.
Apologies. Yeah, so the argument would be that there's only one option to take people's guns. No, but that's not the only thing. Like you can do a lot, like a lot. Like cars kill people, right? We got seatbelts, we got safety regulations, we got tests. Like this is real things that we can do. Like we can change the color of guns, and that would reduce those.
Yeah, but who's gonna fucking report that they've got guns to get them registered?
See that,
pay
and that's, I think
insurance?
that's the slippery slope argument. But there's several policies and decisions that
Not
we
me.
have to stop on moving forward.
All right, everyone, shut up for a moment. Okay, so you're basically saying that we don't have to take all the guns away. We could just maybe make gun regulations to make them safer. Yeah, I don't think anyone's like all that against that. I mean, the only thing I would say though is that if you're going to do this, you would have to have a very popular candidate who has established the faith of the people by other means. Because the moment you mention guns and the moment you mention gun regulation, people are going to take that to mean something different. They're going to take that as a political signal, which means you're going to like do more than what you're actually saying. So if you want to have more safety regulations, then yeah, in abstract, that's all good and well. I don't abstractly or personally disagree with that, but it's about what are you politically and materially like actually saying and meaning with that. And the political significance of something like that and in the American context, it's usually just going to be that you're signaling against guns, and it's going to I think it could cost you the trust of the people. I think that's something that could be dealt with if we had a new, more popular government. But with the current government we have, I don't even think we can begin to address this issue because the government has just lost the faith of the people so much so that if they even mention something like that, it would be rejected, out of hand. I mean, like I'm saying, remember, this is the same government that could not even convince people to like wear masks and this kind of stuff. So I don't think the government has the popularity to convince the people of that. I think if you want to have an actual solution to these kinds of problems, we have to replace these current rotten politicians with politicians who actually represent the American people, who actually love the American people, who actually have the trust of the American people. And then maybe you can talk about reforms or maybe regulations and things that might, more moderate, ideas that might, increase, gun safety. But I think before you can even do that, you have to have better politicians and you have to have better political parties that exist. Right now, we have a two-party duopoly that has no faith from the American people and that the American people detest, and they're not going to accept these kinds of changes from these rotten politicians. So I'm going to unmute. Let's see here. I'm going to unmute Abe Ibrahim once I get a chance. Okay. All right, I unmuted everyone, but I only want Ibrahim to talk, just because I want to keep this kind of organized and structured.
I appreciate it. Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
So when you say that we've lost, and this is not an argument to say that there isn't, corruption, widespread corruption, all of those things that exist in government, understandable. Power, absolute power corrupts absolute, whatever. So I believe that the trust within our government, it doesn't lie in the politicians. It never has. It's in the systems that we have set up. And that's what we give the trust to as the government. Like we trust the founders. We're just smart enough to put a system together, put a game together that didn't allow us to fuck ourselves. I'm like, it's that easy, right? So if the system doesn't allow it to fail and we can make it fail, by inaction, because remember, the only thing that can make it fail is that we do nothing, right? That's the only way you only miss every shot you don't take. You know what I mean? So if the system is made for us to be successful, because checks and balances, and we don't want to screw ourselves, then what is the thing that you can identify or can identify with the American people that would instill faith in the government? Like for me, something that I would say that could instill faith, he brought the troops home from Afghanistan. Like I'm like, all right, obviously you're not here to kill soldiers. Like obviously you're not here to go waste lives in a dumb war, and that's great. That's awesome. Anybody that's for not wasting an American life for nothing.
You mind if I cut you off here and respond?
Please.
All right. So So I think the reason why I bring up lack of faith in the currently existing politicians is because it's gotten to the level where these politicians are not only just bad politicians, right? They are actually actively trying to corrode the very American system that you're talking about. So, for example, you have stuff like corporations gaining free speech while citizens are losing freedom of speech on the internet because the internet is technically privatized, right? Even though it's really, public, it's still technically privatized. So you're basically losing your right to free speech. You have illegal, unconstitutional wars. Like, for example, George Bush going into Iraq, it was unconstitutional because usually you have to get a certain amount of Congress to vote for that and agree with that. So I think we have a system where there's a political elite backed by finance capital, by a financial class, by Wall Street, and by other, entrenched segments of the deep state that are actively trying to corrode our Constitution and our democracy. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say about Biden specifically is I think Biden, more than anything, has lost the faith of the people. Regardless of what you personally think about Biden, his approval ratings are abysmal. And they just go down and down and down and down. And no one trusts him. No one likes him. He just does not, objectively speaking, have the faith of the American people. I mean, if you look at, for example, a country like Russia, right, where Putin has like over 70% approval rating, or even a better example, a country like China, where like Xi has like over a 90% approval rating. That's what faith in a political leader actually looks like. That's what the unity between the people and their political leadership actually looks like. Not in America, where we have Biden and like 70% of the country, or like 60% of the country, absolutely detest him. Now, as far as getting the troops out of Afghanistan, I don't think that's really unique to Biden, because even before Biden got into office, there was actually a deal that Trump made with the Taliban, which was to retreat the troops from Afghanistan before Biden even got into office and actually did that. Biden actually delayed the retreat of the troops. Next thing I want to say is that Biden, in respect to the war in Ukraine, has pushed us into a situation where we've gotten dangerously close to nuclear war. And for what? It's because he wants to continue backing the neo-Nazis in Ukraine that are terrorizing the people in Ukraine, first of all, and have a kind of genocidal hatred towards ethnic Russians. So he's doing all this just to protect his geopolitical interest in Ukraine. He's trying to fund neo-Nazis there. So I think as far as foreign politics goes, foreign affairs goes, he's not really an example of a peace president. He's fueling a very dangerous war and threatening to get us all involved in this war, threatening to make it go nuclear, basically. In Taiwan, he's saying that if China puts troops in Taiwan, he's going to invade Taiwan. So again, he's threatening war with a nuclear power over something that's not even relevant to the American people. I mean, what does Taiwan have to do with America? Is Taiwan an American state? No, it's not an American state. He's threatening world war over places that are not within American sovereignty. And he's also bombing Somalia. I don't think he's really an example of a peace president. If anything, I would say Trump was more of a peace president than Biden. Trump said that, no, he wouldn't go to war for Taiwan because it's on the other fucking side of the globe, right? That's more of a peace president than Biden. When Trump was in office, he didn't fuel the tensions in Ukraine. He didn't threaten to bring Ukraine into NATO. Trump even said that if the other countries are not going to pay properly for NATO, he might dissolve it, right? So I think Trump was more of a peaceful president than Biden. I mean, Trump was one of the only presidents in modern American history to not start any new wars. And he also negotiated the very deal that got the U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. So if anything, I would say Biden has even less trust from the people than Trump does. But even Trump, who has more, I think, trust from the American people, even he, I don't think even he would not be able to like push gun reform. He would have a better chance. But I think we need a real popular government that actually defends and restores the value and meaning of the Constitution, and makes the American Republic a true people's republic that is by, for, and of the people. Until we have political leadership that actually defends the American system you talked about and actually has popularity and a real basis in the people, I don't think there's much of a chance for many real reforms. So while these reforms you talk of, yeah, they're good maybe making it more difficult for crazy people to get guns. But you can't do that unless you actually have a leader or a political party that has actually proven itself to the American people, that the American people can actually trust them. You have to establish trust first, and that's my main point. All right, I'm going to unmute. I don't think anyone's muted, so I think Ibrahim, you can go ahead and speak. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, Julie, feel free to chime in on this, but like I said, the Founding Fathers really, really smart guys. And it's the system, not the politicians, that we give our trust to as American citizens. It's the truth, and when speaking of the occult, it's the esotericisms that the Founding Fathers knew would come about, that have been around for centuries in several other countries, and their intended purpose is for overthrow, usurpation, to destroy from the interior. So, for example, us not involving ourselves in foreign war makes us feel more secure in the homeland because we're less threatening to the world, right? When dealing with a superpower, however, it's a little bit different. It's more of the closer they are to us, the further we have to go back. So for every step back we take, they get to take 10 forward. So us making a stand in Taiwan says that, well, outside of Taiwan being like a major manufacturer for the United States, but outside of that completely, it says that, hey, look, the agreement is don't infringe on the people's lifestyle, the people's that establish society. And in that return, we give you our faith as a government. And in that agreement, we also say that everyone else will be on the same page. And I mean, we've already had a couple of world wars already. There has been real conversation regarding what we will and will not do. So we can't really say, oh, it's a nuclear war. You stress it. It's not the Cold War anymore. We know definitively one nuke goes, they all go, we all lose. Period. Everybody knows that. As soon as somebody says they're going to start a nuclear war with any type of real intent, their people are going to be inclined to overthrow that government immediately. So it's not so much a huge issue about that. But like I said, the esotericism of it, the occultness was the defense. The real defense against these things is the occultness, is the secret cabal. That secret cabal you're talking about, that's the American spirit. That's the one that says we are not going to let these people overthrow us and control us. That's the occult part.
All right, let me respond to that. Here's what I would say about the occult. There's two different conspiracies in America. On the one hand, you have the conspiracy of the deep state, and this is not the same conspiracy of the founding fathers of America. This is not the same conspiracy that gave rise to America. It's the conspiracy of a globalist class that has arisen after the creation of globalist financial institutions after the end of World War II. And that is where the allegiance of the conspiracy of the deep state lies. And that's why it has been corroding and creating loopholes to get around the constitutional rights that were fought for by our founding fathers and by other great Americans throughout American history. That's why they are coming into contradiction with the founding fathers and with the Constitution. Now, there's a second conspiracy, and that is the conspiracy of the people. You can even say it's the conspiracy of God, or it's the conspiracy of the good. This conspiracy, this people's conspiracy, the name for it is none other than communism, which is that we must create a party that represents the working people of America and replace the deep state with that party of the working class. And with the party of the working class, we will defend and restore the sanctity of the American Constitution and make the government serve the people. That's my point. That's the point I'm making. And this is a continuation of the conspiracy of the founding fathers, of their esoteric knowledge and so on. This is the real continuation of it. This is the real, this is what it means to actually be rooted in America's revolutionary history, in the revolutionary history of Washington, right? This is what it means to be rooted in 1776. It's to build the party of the working class and establish the dictatorship of the proletariat, which will have as its goal to ensure that America functions as a people's republic that serves the people, that's by the people, for the people, and of the people, and protects the Constitution. Instead of a working class dictatorship which preserves the Constitution, we have a globalist dictatorship, shameless dictatorship of the elites, which works only to corrode and destroy the American constitutions, the American constitutional rights, the American way of life, the American identity, the American culture, the American family, etc., and so on. They want to destroy all of that. The second thing I would say about Taiwan, now this idea that if we don't encroach upon Taiwan, China is going to be at our doorstep, I think that's foolish because, I mean, Taiwan is literally as far away from America as could be possible. It is right beside the mainland of China. It's on the other side of the world. It is, if you look at a globe, right, America's on one side, Taiwan's on the opposite side. So I don't think anything China does in Taiwan is in a military sense going to be a threat to America. Now, as far as the manufacturing goes, I would say it's a shame that we're even this dependent upon Taiwanese manufacturing to begin with, right? We should reindustrialize our country. We need to rebuild our country. You know, I know people who used to have good manufacturing industrial jobs, 2 decades ago, right? And now they work, in hotels or at Walmart, these low-end jobs that don't pay enough. We need to restore real jobs to America. And the only way you're going to do this is do an infrastructural project and an industrial project. And infrastructure lays the basis for industry, right? So this problem of manufacturing, I think it's a deeper problem that we need to address insofar as reindustrializing America goes. Now, beyond that, I think we can also come to beneficial trade deals with China. China has shown an overwhelming willingness to work together with America. They even phrase it as like, a partnership, right? A partnership with America. But America has, at every instance since 2008, denied the possibility for a continued partnership with China. So I think we could work together to have decent trade deals. But I think still fundamentally, we're going to have to reindustrialize and actually be a competitive economy on our own terms. Third thing I want to say is getting into the history a bit of Taiwan and China, which is that the current situation in China, which is that in Taiwan, it's part of China, but they have their own way of life, and they also have a separate government and so on. This was born out of a civil war that occurred in Chinese history, right? So as far as how China resolves its civil war, I think that's really just the business of the Chinese people. China is a civilization, a country which has been divided and reunified countless times throughout history. And I think it's completely within their right to reunify with Taiwan. How they decide to go about this, that's their choice. I don't think that if they did invade Taiwan, I think that they would do it in a very humane, in a humane way, a way that's as humane as possible. And, it would not be surprising if it was American aggression itself that even, pushed it. Because, America had troops in Taiwan earlier this year, I think. So it's stuff like that, which is already breaking China's trust, which is going to make them more likely to do this. But even beyond that, I think the mainland has every right to reunify with Taiwan because it is, they do live in the same country. They do have a common history. They do have a common identity. They are the same people, even if they may have national differences and so on. They still are part of the same civilization, and that's their business. It's not our business. The same way that we wouldn't want other people to deal with our civil disputes, we shouldn't deal with their civil disputes. We can't even really make a case for it because we really have no relation to Taiwan or to China. They're on the other side of the globe. That's just not our business. It's not our business whatsoever. And as far as nuclear war goes, I know you said that we would never, go to nuclear war because that would be very unpopular and so on. But just look at how close we've gotten with this Ukraine situation. We've gotten very close. There was one point in which members of the House of Representatives in the Senate were talking about having a no-fly zone over Ukraine. You know what would have happened if that actually went through? It would be a world war, and it would be very, very likely a nuclear war. So I think you underestimate just how nihilistic and morally bankrupt the people leading America currently are. You can go ahead and speak. That was pretty much all I had to say in response.
Feel free to disagree. Now, I think we're still on the right track, but I don't want to dismiss any beliefs you may have. So let's say that America is a bastion of hope above all other land that we love because this is where we come from. Let's get that out the way. I do love this country. I know you do as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't fight so hard for it. But we cannot say in a world where we are constantly increasing the amount of people that at some point in time that we're going to all have to sit down and work together on something. Can we agree on that? At some point in time in this world that we going to all have to come together.
Yeah, I can agree on that we're going to have to work together with other countries. My only difference is I think that in order to work with other countries, we have to establish trust with other countries, which is going to create a new, which is going to require a new kind of status quo of foreign relations and geopolitiks. I think in order for us to actually do this, we're going to have to, one, get our troops and our military bases out of these foreign countries. Two, I think we're going to have to put an end to these globalist financial institutions, which act as parasites on the countries of the world, but also on Americans too, even on America now. And I think that's what's going to be necessary for us to have kind of a baseline common trust between countries, civilizations, and nations. And we can have a real dialogue with other civilizations once we establish that baseline of non-interference.
And I totally agree with that. Who wants to, live anywhere that your neighbor's always trying to get in your business? That's okay. But if my neighbor's house is on fire, I need to make sure that fire doesn't spread over here, regardless of whether it's on the corner of my block or right next to my house, because at some point that fire could spread to my house.
But what if you lived in California and this so-called fire was like in New York? But here's another thing. I don't think there is a fire. So my position is this: China has the mainland of China, the People's Republic of China, has every right to reunify with Taiwan. This is their internal business. It would not be a bad thing. If anything, it would be a good thing. It would be a good thing. It's their historical destiny.
I don't disagree with you that it is an American ideal and a presumed a part of our Constitution that the people themselves should hold the power over their government. I don't disagree with that. But would that also not mean that other places, even though those people have changed, like Taiwan's not China no more? We have to agree to that. I understand that.
I don't agree. I can't. That's where you lose me. I completely cannot agree to that. So one, just on official terms, I mean, the name of the government in Taiwan is the Republic of China, right? Taiwan came about not as a desire to secede from China, but as the result of a civil war, right? Right. It came about as a government in exile, and that civil war has ultimately not been fully resolved. There's a new status quo, a peaceful status quo.
And they were supposed to return about a year ago. I don't think you're wrong about that. The process of unification of a government with another government is that government's business. Totally agree.
And obviously it would be better if it's peaceful, but I think it would be more likely to be peaceful if America itself stopped making all these threats. If America did not have troops that were discovered there earlier, I think in 2021. I mean, these kinds of things are barriers to a more peaceful reunification.
And I think that goes back to your opinion regarding their bankruptness, moral bankruptness, regarding how they govern the people. But it's still a political system that goes to the polarization of how we deal with politics here. It's not, come up with the best idea. It's how hard can I bend you before you break to my will? That's what the basics of our politics have come to. It's not, and as far as industry wise, a lot of the boom that we got from that was from innovation, and we've hit a ceiling in innovation. That's just where we are now. I also don't disagree with you regarding American production and what that could do for our competitiveness globally, allowing us to, be more financially stable in the homeland. But we live in America, and no business in America can sustain American consumption. And that's where a lot of foreign trade come from. That's why our things are cheap. This iPhone probably be 10 times as more if it was built here. And it's not to say that, hey, would I be more happy with it here in America? Yes. If I knew my brother was making money because of something that was happening that I was doing, hell yeah, I wanted to do that. But that's not the case of business. That's not the free market that we live in. And I'm not fully off the communist socialist style where everyone can just put together for everybody's benefit. I'm not against that. But the structure that I've been hearing, at least and majority wise, and the strongest argument I've heard, the most Vietnamese put forward argument is some type of totalitarian government. And that's nothing that I've ever wanted to be. And furthermore, in order for us to organize ourselves with a dictatorship or, a totalitarian government, that's like a kingdom. And we would have to do it like how we do marriages. But how do you have a formed unification, a blood unification with a democracy? And I get that goes back to having some type of super figure. But that's That's fascism, man. We already fought and beat.
Let me just kind of address this whole thing about totalitarianism. So there's a lot of anti-communist lies that I think gives a bad picture to the way communism works. And on the other hand, there's a lot of kind of utopian, idealistic leftists who go a little bit too far in the reverse. My position is this: as far as the dictatorship of the proletariat goes, it is actually the dictatorship of the proletariat which is necessary for maintaining democracy. This is why, for example, in the Soviet Union, Stalin was the one who created the democratic constitution. Stalin was the one who raised education and literacy levels to a level where people could actually participate in politics, in the first place. And in China, the dictatorship of the proletariat, of the Communist Party exists alongside the Republic of China and a thriving democracy. And also there's this kind of dialectic where a strong central state gives rise to and allows for strong local government. So that's why in China, for example, ruled by a communist party, a lot of things are decided locally, actually, by the local governments that are elected on a local level. That's where most of the things that actually affect people are decided. It's not by the central government. It's actually by local governments. So I think the picture of communism is actually a lot more complicated than just it's not like this 1984 fantasy. And this comparison to fascism, I think, is wrong because Germany, right? It was the USSR who was predominantly, capable of, who did the most in defeating Nazi Germany. I mean, look at all the lives that the Communist Party of China sacrificed fighting against the Imperial Japan. So it was communists who played probably the biggest role in the defeat of Nazism and fascism historically. I mean, Mao Zedong has this quote, for instance, where he says, if it was not for the October Revolution, it would have been impossible to defeat the fascists in Germany and Italy and Japan. And I think that's completely true. Now, there was something else you said about capitalism, a bit about like how we have a free market and so on. Well, the thing is, I don't think we actually have a free market anymore. I think since the end of the First World War, we've basically started to have a kind of a early socialist economy, right? Because after the end of the First World War, you kind of see the end of like private finance capital, and that's replaced by government investment in other governments. And this becomes like the kind of leading financial basis of the first world economies. It was state investment, state planned investment. Even private investors had to follow the diplomatic plans of the state. And if you read Michael Hudson, he talks a lot about this. And by the time you get to FDR, you actually have the kind of explicit state planning of the country. You have the government becoming the biggest employer in the country and stuff like this. So I think since then, we haven't really been capitalistic. And I would go even further. If you think about it, even like commodity money, right, has been abolished. Even the gold standard has been done away with. And now we have currency that is based purely in politics, right? Currency that's not even based in value. There is no free market anymore. We have a government planned economy that is through the information gathered by the more decentralized so-called market. The market just acts as an index of information for the government to create these hidden plans they use to plan the economy. I mean, even if you think about it as well, even the fact that we like in our presidential debates, we have these discussions and debates about what direction the economy should go in. That itself is just proof that we literally plan the economy. I think this is proof. Now, as far as like manufacturing goes, we don't have to manufacture everything here. Obviously, our entire consumption needs are not going to be met entirely domestically. There are going to be some, cheap products that come from other places. I mean, that's obviously true. But we can't have. Well, wait a second. What we can have is high-end manufacturing. So if you look at Germany, for example, they have a good reputation for the industrial economy, not just because they have a striving industry, but because they produce high-tech, high-end products. So I think the next stage of industrialization for America is going to be, it would not be producing the same kind of things they would have produced, like 100 years ago. It would be producing more high-tech, high-end products. And this would also allow for higher wages for the people producing it. And so on. So I think this is kind of a non-problem. And I think also as we advance further into the future, we're also going to have more social guarantees. Like I don't think America can function the way it is right now without there being more institutional guarantees. We're going to need a kind of, at least at the very bare minimum, FDR styled reforming of the economy to fit the American people. We need an economic bill of rights. We already live in socialism. We just don't. The people just have not benefited from it. It's about time that they do. That's my position on the matter. We already live in socialism, and it's the bad kind. We need to have communism now.
Okay.
We have corporate socialism.
So our government is ran based off of the economy. We only make moves if we can make money, and more majority, like in large, the country wise. Now, as far as you can't have a socialist government without making the best price, and you can't get the best price without outsourcing to a cheaper manufacturer, and you can't get a cheaper manufacturer than foreign government. That's the thing that keeps it there, and that's why it's a free market.
It depends on the product. It depends on the product, though. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
It doesn't depend on.
No, it does. It does depend on the product. Hey, literally, look at Germany. Look, Germany. Look at Germany. Just look at Germany.
Furthermore, the high quality jobs that you are identifying are things of the past. Just saying that.
No, look at Germany right now. Look at Germany.
And that's why we have Taiwan, because they make the chips. That's why we outsource.
Yeah, but even Taiwan is like not having cheap labor. Even Taiwan doesn't. But yeah, here's the thing. But even Taiwan doesn't have cheap, efficient labor.
And shipping them to America. America doesn't have that resource. And for us to just imagine those things.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm going to have to cut you off a little bit. I'm going to have to cut you off a little bit because I think you're just kind of wrong about this. So one, if you use mainland China, that might be a better example because the wages are a bit low there. But in Taiwan, they have wages that are nearly as high as ours, and production of goods is also expensive in Taiwan. And because you're buying it from a foreign government, and there's there's cost of delivery, and there's usually like different taxes and stuff like that. I don't even know if it's necessarily cheaper than if we produced it domestically. Secondly, the products that we produce domestically, they're not going to be just for domestic consumption. They're also going to be for trading with other countries. And if you look at Germany, again, I point to Germany because, well, Germany has a lot of problems. It does still have thriving industry. You can solve this problem of like cheap goods just by producing high-end goods that are going to be expensive by any manufacturer.
But that's not true.
But you can. That's how Germany works. They produce high-end goods, and that's why they have high wages and good industry.
Germany has a history of high-end goods. That's why.
What do you say?
Germany has a long established history of that's how it works. Like
but that history has to start somewhere. We used to have a great history of industrialization.
I was describing. I was pointing out that the best version of communism is the worst state of the people, but still able to function. So China, they have a long history. Their people know what their people do, and that's what their people do. And then they have a government on top of it. And it's at its lowest state, it's its most optimal. In Russia, their same thing, a long-standing history of how they should and should not live their lives. And then they have a government. But in America, our country's so young that we figured that's not going to be an option because our lowest state at most optimal was slavery. And that's not what we stand for as a democracy or as a free people.
Yeah, but I reject the entire premise that communism is like the worst state, or like the state that is like least optimal. I just don't.
No. It's at its lowest state, its lowest energy state, where it is most efficient. Yes, it is.
What do you mean by lowest energy state?
I can't. I'm sorry. Like that is literally the base understanding of it. If a particle has a low energy,
go ahead.
It is not likely to move, and it is not likely to change. And because it's not going to change significantly over time, it will be able to maintain that energy state.
I get what you're saying. So you're basically saying that a communist state is going to be like static, unchanging, stable, right?
Period.
Yeah, well, here's what I would say, though. You can't say that slavery was the most stable state of America when literally it was the basis for a civil war.
No. I can say that because I can go to the economics of it.
Yeah, but the economics got outmoded by industrialization. That's why that's a big part of why.
No. Industrialization capitalized on it, and that's what extended slavery into the 20th century.
No, wait a second. Industrialization, yes, was based upon agricultural surpluses, which were created by slavery.
No, it was based on slave labor.
That's what I just said. I just said it was based upon agricultural surpluses, which were created by slavery. maybe, but
agriculture are farmers that sell products, and the sale of those products is the agriculture.
no, you're not
Slavery
getting.
is
You're
not
making. Yeah, but you're literally making a non-point. When I say agriculture, I literally just mean
No, my
like
point
products.
is that what you're identifying.
Yeah, but
is
what I'm
not
saying, you're not. You're missing the
fascism.
point. You're missing the point. I'm literally agreeing that slavery produced the surpluses needed for industrialization.
The idea behind fascism is that
But
there is
no,
someone.
you're getting. Listen, I want you to stay on topic. We're gonna stay on topic. We're gonna address this first, then you can talk about fascism. Slavery produced surpluses, which made industrialization possible. But eventually, it came into contradiction with the new industrial society.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it
They
did.
used
It
slavery
did. That's why it was over. Why do you think it was overthrown by the industrial north?
Proponents of slavery, just because there were jobs.
No, not later on. Not in the north. No. Okay, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a simple question. In the north, wait 1 second. Let me ask you a simple question. The north, which was on the side of the Union, were they more industrial or less industrial than the South?
The factories in the north, the farms were in the south.
Exactly, and it was the North that went to war with the South. What I'm saying is that the basis of this, I'm not saying it was the industrialists themselves, but the basis of this was this contradiction of the new industrial capitalist mode of production and the old mode of production, which was more or less based upon slavery. They came into contradiction with each other. And so I'm saying this idea that America as a slave society was its most stable is not true, because it was ridden with contradictions, which eventually tore it apart and split it in half.
No. The contradiction being applied to the law is what split it in half. It's the contradiction we lived with from the very start as a country, and then
that's a big part of it. Yeah, that's what made it possible. Yes, I agree with that. That's another contradiction that made it possible. There was also
at our base state, where we are at what we identify as our American ideals from the freaking pre-Reconstruction to pre-Civil War to post-Reconstruction. We consider that the highlight of American time, and that is literally our worst.
That's actually not true. I would say that's not true, because America was at its most powerful. Wait a second, though. America was at its most powerful.
The most money or anything.
No, but wait 1 moment. America
we had the most amount of people not free in our country.
Why would that make you more powerful? Having more people not free does not inherently make you more powerful. America was at its most.
No. And once again, a low energy state, a state.
It wasn't stable though, but it was not stable.
Yes, it
No, there wasn't. There was literally a civil war. How can you say it's stable when it resulted in a civil war?
America's only 300 years old.
I get that America's a new country, but I'm saying that you're pointing to this as a reference point of stability. But it's not. If you want to talk about, here's the thing though. If you want to talk about stability in America, this is going to go.
That is the reference point that we use in America.
No, it's not. What do you mean it's the reference? That's not the reference point we use in America. You yourself. Wait a second. You yourself pointed out the fact that this came into contradiction with the very legal institution of America, which was the Constitution.
Yeah, you're right.
The Constitution is the real reference point of America in American tradition.
That's why we verified the Constitution. That's why we love it so much, because it was true.
Yeah, okay, so that's what I'm saying. If you want to go to the most stable point, then it would be the Constitution itself. But the Constitution, wait a second.
Communist.
But wait a second. If the Constitution is the most stable point of America, and if communism is a return to the lowest state, and you're saying the most stable, and in this case, it would be a return to the Constitution. But here's the main point. It would be a return to the Constitution based upon new 21st century realities. It would be a return to the essence of the Constitution in the new form.
Of the Constitution
No, it was not. You yourself said. You yourself admitted. Wait a second. You yourself admitted that it was the legal contradiction of the Constitution with slavery.
Freed the slaves. It was the contradiction that freed the.
And where did that contradiction come from? It came from the Constitution itself. That's my whole point.
But the Constitution was not that point. The Constitution, when it was made, wasn't.
Yeah, that's why I said the essence of the Constitution. You're privileging. Here's the thing. You're privileging the form. I'm saying the essence of the Constitution. That's why the Constitution is a living document, because it's not a dead.
And that's why I'm saying that period was identified as the reference. It's because we're identifying.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that this point of stability that you're talking about,
of that period.
Let me try to listen to me. I'm going to try to make this a little bit more clear. The reason why the Constitution is the most stable, it's because we speak of the Constitution not as a singular determinate form or a dead essence, but as a living essence. So to return to the Constitution does not mean to return to its original writings, but to return to its original essential revolutionary significance. And that's going to take a new form. This is the point I'm getting at. The Constitution has always been a living document. Whenever there's been a progressive movement in America, it's had to wield the Constitution, and the Constitution has had to evolve and develop. But these developments are based upon the original logic of the Constitution, based upon the original essence of the Constitution, even if they may come into contradiction at times with some of the letters or the form of the Constitution and of the law. When I speak of the Constitution, I speak of this living, developing, dialectical essence. Now, as far as communism goes, returning to the essence of the Constitution, what I think this would look like is probably something like FDR's proposal for an economic bill of rights. It would look like and also restoration of free speech. It would look like more barriers to going to war, like were originally intended, that George Bush started to go away with. It would look like these things. A communist party coming to power in America, it would be to defend the Constitution as a living document. Defend the Constitution as a living document. This means protect the rights we're already guaranteed and expand these rights to fit our modern era.
Why wouldn't together as a constitution disband why wouldn't come together as a communist government based on the ideals of America? I mean, based on the ideals of the Constitution, disband the Constitution. Like what you're describing is a dissolvement of the Constitution.
No, I'm not describing a dissolvement of the Constitution. Look up the Economic Bill of Rights. This was like an actual idea that FDR started to push forward. It would just mean making amendments to the Constitution, like amendments that already happened. There would be obviously, there'd have to be there'd have to be some kind of legitimacy. It couldn't just be done purely by force. But I'm saying we would look at the Constitution as a living document. That's always been how the Constitution has been looked at historically. I mean, look at how many amendments there are. There's over 20 amendments to the Constitution. It's a living document. It's to stay true to the essence. The form must evolve. That's the wisdom of dialectical materialism. If you don't evolve the form, you actually betray the essence of the Constitution. That's what I'm getting at. And as far as why wouldn't we do away with the Constitution, it's because the Constitution, I think as we can both admit, is the very thing that gives legitimacy to any form of statehood in America in the first place, because it's one of the only things that unifies all Americans as Americans. There's an objective reality to the living document of the Constitution, which unifies Americans as American. So I don't think doing away with it is even an option. Another thing I would like to say as well is that a lot of the times when communists came into power, while they had to do away with so many of the existing legal structures, is because in most cases when they came to power, they were replacing monarchies and tsardoms and stuff like this. But in our case, we already have a democratic republic. So we just need to replace the deep state and restore, these constitutional rights. And like I said, I think even expand the Constitution.
Okay, and that's where we get back to the occult part. So you can't dissolve a conspiracy. You can't get rid of an idea. You can't kill an idea. You can only develop it further. Why don't we just take the occult that we got and make it a better occult? Make it more publicized. Have the dudes that's in the cabal, put them on a TV show and put cameras on them 24 hours a day. That's what you want to do in a situation where you
wait a second. What I'm actually saying though is that the conspiracy that exists, and I don't know if you call them Jews or not, but I don't think it's inherently Jewish or anything like that. If anything, I think it's more or less British. The conspiracy that exists, that's not the conspiracy of the founding fathers anymore. That's the conspiracy of the ruling elite. And it's not even America's ruling elite anymore. It's a global ruling elite. I am for the conspiracy. The only way you can stay true to this conspiracy of the founding fathers is by the people's conspiracy, the communist conspiracy.
We know how to overcome the popular guy. That guy is just we don't get it. We are taught that intrinsically. Our fathers pass that down to their sons just to tell them, hey, look, when a guy's doing it like this how you do it, because that's what this is, and that's what you don't want.
So all I'm saying is that we need a proletarian revolution, and we need to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat and defend American democracy and our Constitution. That's all I'm saying. And like you said, it is something ingrained into us. This this kind of revolutionary legacy of overthrowing, these looters and robbers and thieves that mask as politicians.
Government. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, okay then. I guess we reached a point of agreement then. I think I'm gonna give this call and this space an end because it's getting a little bit late here. It's nearly 1 a.m. It's a good talk, and I think there wasn't too many people that wanted to debate the tweet I made, but we had that debate in the beginning, and then we had some other interesting discussions. So I'm just gonna call it here, and I hope y'all have a good night.
You too, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.